Dallas Cowboys owner Jerry Jones says he's so proud of quarterback Dak Prescott for standing during the national anthem. But at his age, Jerry Jones is impressed by anyone who doesn't grunt when they stand.
Aww. Former Assistant FBI Director Peter Strzok, who is an agent involved in the Russia investigation, has been officially fired over his anti-Trump text messages. The Trump administration feels that petty, inflammatory comments should strictly be reserved for Twitter.
Some farmers in the Pacific Northwest are using lasers instead of scarecrows to protect their crops from birds. It worked at first, then the birds took Molly and hired a DJ.
I love that one.
That's my favorite. I stole it. Sorry. It's yours.
Seattle has raised more than $10 million in tax revenue over their tax on sugary drinks in the past 6 months since the tax has been imposed. Following the success of that, they have decided to raise even more revenue by starting a tax on blonde dreadlocks.
It was a toss-up between both of those. I liked them both a lot. A lot happening in the Pacific Northwest this week. And finally, a petition calling for LeBron James to replace current Education Secretary Betsy DeVos as the head of the Department of Education has garnered more than 10,000 signatures. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, unless it stipulates that Betsy DeVos also has to join the Lakers. The Trump Report starts now.
You're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Ooh.
Well, we're feeling it this week.
Oh, yeah. I'm glad I put this tape in.
This makes me want to watch in Living Single, every 90s.
Martin? Jamie
Martin.
Foxx show? In any case, welcome to the Trump Report. And when we were thinking of a song for this week's show, I thought about that one because, not even so much, we didn't even get to the chorus because we don't need it. It's when he says, I'm glad I put this tape in. Because there's been so much talk about taping going on, and the fact that some idiot didn't turn his ringer off. But besides that, it's always good to, whenever you can get a hammer on and it's not, you can't touch this. So tune in next week when we get Adam's Groove on.
Who knew he even had any other song?
I just mentioned one, and of course, Too Legit to Quit. But anyway, we'll go through the MC Hammer
catalog
next show. It is just Tamra and I. Not the first time that it's been only the two of us here on the show. But it would have been a good week for me to have actually written some jokes, because then we could have put some more funny in. But yeah, I just wasn't. I wasn't feeling it. I was just so busy thinking about MC Hammer songs.
Sure.
But welcome, Tamra,
time-consuming.
and welcome to the audience who's there, which always includes our friend, Storage Yard resident. We always appreciate that time changes, day changes. He's always there for us. You're like the cast of Friends. You'll be there for us.
Storage Yard.
Yeah. Who has been on the show before, by the way.
Yeah.
And we do need to have you on again. We'll get to it. But anyway, so there's so much to talk about. And there's also, there's a couple things that some threads we want to pull on from last week, things that we literally ran out of time for, that sort of thing. But I guess Omarosa is really where we have to start this week. Tamra, there's no way anyone could have foreseen this not going well for Omarosa, for the Trump administration, for President Trump, and for the American people. Like bringing her, such a lovable, just beloved television character.
And just so qualified.
Yeah, obviously, she's very qualified. Is there any, and there's so many times here on the show we talk about, does anything about this surprise you? Is there anything about the way this has played out, the secret taping, which you'd feel like would be some kind of, treasonous act, but that's not going to bother Omarosa. Does any of this surprise you?
I'm surprised that this is in promotion of a book that she's writing as opposed to a new reality show called Omarosa's World. It's a book instead of a show.
Yeah, it's always a show for her, I think. The thing I don't like, there's a lot of things, but she was being characterized as the first reality star villain. And I gotta push back on that, because anybody who saw the first season of Survivor, that naked guy, Richard Hatch.
Yeah.
Richard Hatch was the first reality show villain. So I'm sorry, Omarosa, you don't get that crown.
Richard Hatch has just been announced that he will be in charge of the Space Force. Trump has just appointed him deputy director of the Space Force.
He doesn't have to put on any pants, so that's why he signed up. Somebody has to break it up, break the news. So there was one thing, obviously she claims that she's heard President Trump use the N-word. And there's, believe me, that is not the most far-fetched thing for me to believe, that he might use the word. But then when you consider the source, it's really, it's kind of like Sophie's Choice. Like, who do I trust least? Donald Trump? Omarosa? I don't have a clear answer. I guess
John Kelly.
Well, yeah, if you're gonna put all three of them in there. By the way, I would take R. Kelly out of all of these, at least
most trustworthy.
Well, now that he has that like 9-minute songs where he talks about all the things that he did, or tries to.
You're back on his side.
yeah. Let's be honest. Ever since Trapped in the Closet, I've never really been off R. Kelly's side. I just shake my head. But when you can do an epic like that. But anyway, we might be slightly off the topic there. But so I don't know. I mean, let's put it this way. Who do you believe the least? Is it Omarosa? Is it President Trump? Like, if you hear her saying, "Oh, I heard Donald Trump say the N-word," I feel like, no, you probably didn't. Not that it's impossible. Like, if somebody else said it, I'd be like, oh, maybe. But I don't know. I'm just not inclined to believe her.
I have to say that who I believe is pretty irrelevant. And I think, let me say this reluctantly, this whole thing about the tape is irrelevant. And I don't mean to say that to diminish how important it would be if he was on record saying the N-word. But what I mean is that until we have evidence of this, it's all he said, she said. It's just fodder when we should be focusing on, again, we should always be focusing on what's actually happening rather than the circus that's going on in Trump's Twitter feed. So she can say that this exists. We don't know that it exists. Of course, if it comes out, honestly, the people that are opposing Trump know that he is capable of saying that. The people that are on his side, it will not matter if it comes out that he said that.
No, I mean, we've covered at great length what in any other election would have been the most damning piece of audio you could uncover. And to this point, the only person to really suffer for it is still Billy Bush. So, I think that, that's definitely a more, any kind of racial epithet on tape it's a lot more explosive than anything that you could say, being demeaning to women. I'm sure that he could chalk racism up to locker room talk for anyone who's ever been in a locker room.
And his supporters will say, they'll dismiss it, and because that's what happens. But yeah, so I don't know, I can't say. I have absolutely no idea whether this exists or not. It's until there's more tangible evidence, then there's not really much I can have an opinion on.
In the chat, R. Scott Brown points out, isn't it funny how everyone that Trump has ever hired, he hires the best people, but they end up being lowlifes and liars as soon as they're fired. That's a great observation. I think his definition of best people is probably a lot different than some of the rest of ours. He's using it on the same scale that he picks which one of his sons is the best.
Exactly. After all of this time, almost 2 years of his presidency, I think obviously it's clear how easy it is to manipulate him with compliments and praise, and how easy it is to get him to, I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine. If I say that he's great at his job, I tweet, positive things about him, then I really wish that some of the Democrats would harness this juvenile nature of his to, kowtow to whoever has something positive to say about him, and whoever, he feels is in his court. I really wish that, some of the seedier Democrats would use this to their advantage to be like, hey, you know what? I think he's a great guy. Hey, by the way, can we put those strict EPA regulations back in place? Things like that. Like, I think Trump he's a lot smarter than people give him credit for. In fact, I believe that he understands that we shouldn't build a wall. Like somebody could smooth talk him into being on our side.
I feel like, you get Donald Trump outside of the normal political circles. I feel like there isn't somebody who's an established politician like that. But there has to be someone. I'm thinking, there has to be an actor, comedian. There has to be somebody who could be like, well, let me just take that approach. Maybe it needs to. Because I don't know. I don't think that there are not,
You're
the
right.
elected officials.
Yeah, you're right. That would not go well for them.
And not because I think it would be beneath an elected official. I just don't know that their minds work that way.
So you're saying perhaps this should fall on the shoulders of like a panel of hosts who discuss Trump's, the inner workings of the White House from week to week.
We should do this as soon as President Trump comes on with us. We will talk to him. And we will just explain to him, the way that things are going to need to be. Now, to R. Scott Brown's point, I wanted to make sure I got the verbiage correct. He did characterize Omarosa as vicious but not smart, using the word wacky. And also that John Kelly, quote, told me she was a loser and everyone in the West Wing hated her. John Kelly doesn't strike me as a guy who's like, she's a loser. He's the only one who calls people losers, I think, in that White House. I'm just guessing. But
John Kelly literally said she's a dweeb. She's a pants her. Pink belly.
Yeah.
L7.
And he also talked about how Omarosa begged him for a job with tears in her eyes. That doesn't ring true as to that would. I feel like it was probably, some sort of negotiation. There was like she had some kind of leverage on him. Like, you're going to give me that White House job. Oh, yes, I am. I feel like it was more like that. But
nothing that I read said. Here's one thing is that I think she was asked in one of the articles that I read what was the date of these tapes, like when it was this Apprentice. It was while he was on this Apprentice, so that means that she was aware that these tapes of him saying the N-word existed but still agreed to work for him. So yeah, she said that she's complicit in what's in what the White House had done while she was there. But it's just sort of like, well, if this, why is this a big deal now when it wasn't a big deal to you when you were happy to work for him?
Well, I mean, I think anybody who's ever been fired all of a sudden that changes the way you feel. No, we don't have any of our legal representation here on the show, but President Trump says that Omarosa signed a non-disclosure agreement, and because she warns that there are absolutely more tapes. And legal experts wonder whether or not the White House can legally keep her quiet. If we had legal representation, I would ask, so legally, is she not supposed to do this? But I don't think that matters as much because I think these tapes will definitely get out and she will definitely say whatever she wants to. And she's definitely alluded to, I alluded to how she got the job in the first place is just, knowing too much. She kind of alluded to that she has some kind of protection. So, Tamra, do you think that like Omarosa's this is the last we're gonna hear of her? Which I guess sounds more ominous than I meant because I'm implying that somebody's going to have her killed, which is not what I'm trying to say. That she's gonna just go quietly into that good night, like, I better stop talking about Donald Trump.
Yeah, who is her protection? Ronnie Ortiz from Jersey Shore, like in the situation. Like who is her protection? I don't know. I mean, until anything comes out, we do need to understand what's the range of a non-disclosure agreement. Depending, I guess they're always different. So depending on what hers said that she signed, because if she released the tape that she did Was it just one that she released?
That's all
already?
I've heard. But somebody in the chat, let me know if you've heard more. Please let us know, and we will try and find them, and we'll listen to them.
Oh yeah, because what does what's the stipulation in the non-disclosure agreement that says she can release this tape but not other tapes that she allegedly has? So who knows?
Yeah, I mean, as with anything, it's like when Kanye puts out an album. The first thing that drops isn't going to be the best thing. It's going to be the thing that gets everybody talking. No, but when anybody has what they think is evidence, you always have the thing that's going to make them talk. And then you allude to something else, and then you let them talk and talk and talk. And then when they say something that contradicts the other piece of evidence you have, that's when I believe the legal term is blammo. Just put it right there in court. I've seen enough Law and Order. I know how it works. That's exactly what Sam Waterston would do. Anyway, there was something that we talked about on this show is something that Omarosa said. So it means she's clearly a fan. Thanks for watching. But that Melania's style choices are never accidental, that she uses style to punish her husband, as opposed to her husband who uses his style to punish the clothes by stretching them as much as possible. Thank you. It's because he's fat. Yeah, come on, please. It's fun. I mean, a lot of people don't think it's fun, and, but this is how we talk about it. But I don't know. This is the most believable thing that I heard all week.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that's definitely true.
100%
like,
true.
Wearing the I don't care jacket.
Yeah. Very calculated.
That's not what it says, but you know what I mean. The jacket that says you don't care. Yeah. So you're on board with this, right?
Yeah.
This is one of those times where we feel like we can agree with Omarosa.
Yeah, Melania's forte is fashion, and that's what she's been using to retaliate, her dissatisfaction with having to take this role that she did not sign up for. So I 100% agree that's what she's been doing. That's clothing is what is in her arsenal.
So, Omarosa, you should get some more stuff out to us that we actually can believe. R. Scott Brown says, everyone in the White House is an employee of the people. The presidency is not a subsidiary of the sitting president. But if you sign a non-disclosure agreement, especially for a big government job like that, there are a lot of ways that you can sort of squeeze someone from talking if they've worked at the White House. But I certainly understand your point, and thanks for being so vocal, R. Scott Brown, and hello to Lady Goth and Storage Yard Resident. Sometimes people, they don't like when you don't acknowledge that they're there in the chat, and as always, every week we should always make sure that we give a special shout out to William Winters, who's our biggest fan, and we really appreciate you watching the show every week. It means so much to us that you always watch the show and that you care so much about what we say on the show. So you mentioned in the top, and I stopped myself from interrupting you because I didn't want to disrupt the flow of the jokes, but then I interrupted like 3 other times. How you explain to me STRZOK? There's no way that's not Strozak. I mean, that sounds like Prozac, but there. I mean, and I'm not saying you've pronounced it wrong. That's not the point I'm trying to make. Mm-hmm. I'm making the point that that's how I've heard it. That spelling just doesn't add up.
This is the topic we're going to
we'll talk about him in 1 second. But, I mean, when you first saw that, you're not
let's ask Melania or anyone from the Eastern Bloc. I think how to pronounce Struk. That's specifically how I heard it pronounced.
No, I've heard it that way too. Yeah.
But
you know what? That sounds like fake news to me. Mr. Strozak, let us know how. But anyway, Mr. Strzok, was fired months after these anti-Trump texts were revealed, which means that maybe it has a little bit less to do with the Trump texts, but it doesn't reflect well on the FBI. I mean, regardless of how people feel about President Trump, I don't know, that's the way I feel, and you tell me if you feel differently, Tamra, that, when it's like, oh, yeah, we can't let this happen, we're going to have to get this guy. It's just like, man, why do you put that in writing? I mean, you're like chatting with your side piece. You don't have to send that to her in a text on a company phone, do you?
Was she his side piece?
That's what I thought she was.
A colleague.
No, okay, well, maybe I've got the story wrong, but it's not his wife, and I really thought it was his girlfriend. Well, let me know if I'm wrong. But anyway, you put it in writing. So that part, I might have just propagated fake news, but I don't think so. But
I
you don't
can't
really put it in writing.
imagine that he is the only government employee to not. I mean, wasn't John Kelly or was it Tillerson that had some? They had some. No, never mind. I don't want to go into it because I'm
But there was
going to get
something- you
information.
remember
wrong.
there
I remember
being
there was
something-
something that somebody had said, and they were like, "Yeah, they walked it back." You know,
Yeah.
it was mad at the moment or something like that. But it's like he can't be the only government employee that has texted, this guy's an idiot, you know, like
Yeah.
even people who are on Trump's side, you know, you get frustrated in your stressful work day, you know, people often call their boss an idiot when they don't mean it, you know, they're just frustrated or something. So this cannot be the only example of that out there. He definitely, this entirely had to do with the Russia investigation and, you know, getting one more person closely involved in the investigation out of the kitchen. And
Well, you know, I must be in the minority because obviously I've never characterized anyone I worked for in anything but the highest light possible. So I guess that this is what happens to other people who don't love their
you're
work.
a kind spirit, Christian Blatt. Never a negative word.
It's true.
Against-
It's against
Not
anyone.
even R. Kelly.
No. Hey, I just happened to see the upside to R. Kelly. You know, when you have Trapped in the Closet and one of the chapters ends with, let's say, a little person coming out as being the big reveal, you had me at hello, R. Kelly. But anyway, so these texts are, you know, probably a part of the reason, but there's a lot of jumps in logic for President Trump, go figure. But he's using this as like, this is his excuse to demand that that Mueller and the Russia probe and that Hillary's email investigation be redone. And I think, could President Trump be missing the point?
I don't know. Could
It
he?
doesn't sound like him, though.
Let's. The fact that he has this systematic predictability of just constantly putting it back on Hillary Clinton 2 years after she's been out of the spotlight and nothing has anything. What's the worst that it's just hilarious every time he's like, what we really need to be focusing on is Hillary Clinton. He's going to be saying that on his deathbed when the doctor tells him that, you know, he can't have any, you know, he can't eat a Snickers bar. Whatever. He's going to put it on Hillary Clinton. Somehow it's always going to go back to her when she has absolutely nothing to do with
it would probably be Crooked Hillary's fault that he couldn't eat. And by the way, you said Snickers bar, but I know that what you meant to say was a deep fried Snickers bar from the county fair.
Thank you.
But, you know, you know, for a lot of people that goes without saying, but I just wanted to make sure that we had that read
Fact
into
check.
the record. Yeah.
Thank you.
But, you know, and look, and this Mueller investigation doesn't seem to be going anywhere, but the thing that I will hear from the right that I don't disagree with entirely is it is taking a long time. Now, as our friend Scott Moore always points out, he would be able to tell you right now how long it took for them to build the case for Watergate, which, you know, in the grand scheme of things is a fairly simple thing that was being investigated, you know, and even building that case takes a long time. So sometimes these things take a while, but there's a lot of feeling that they're taking too long. Rudy Giuliani saying, who we hadn't mentioned yet, we're 25 minutes into the episode, and we had yet to mention Rudy Giuliani. So, Rudy, it was a slow
miss
week for
him.
you. I expect better from you next week, Rudy, all right? Usually we're going to lead the show with you, but we couldn't do it this week. He says that President Trump won't speak with Mueller after September 1st. So they have to really get it together because he wouldn't want to interfere with the midterm elections. And my question about that, what does he think he's going to say that it would interfere with the midterm elections? You know, who is he swaying votes towards? I don't have an answer, especially because this comes from the head of Rudy Giuliani. But Tamra, give us your interpretation of the September 1st ultimatum. And it was so nice of him to not want to interfere with the midterm elections.
Well, I guess I need clarification because we haven't been told that he's talked to Mueller now.
Oh, no, but he's saying the sit down has to happen before that. You know,
Yeah.
it has to happen before September 1st.
Well, you know, they're so good at deadlines, as we've seen with the reuniting
True.
immigrant families. So I would say, and that's not the only example of pushing back deadlines. So I would say that the September 1st is pretty irrelevant.
Well, it's also interesting because it is August 13th, so that's only a few weeks to go. And, I mean, nothing really happens. If anybody's ever been in Washington in August, you understand why they usually take the recess and how nothing could possibly get done.
Also, I don't think legally Mueller can interview him when he wants to. I don't think that the midterm elections, this possibly interfering with the midterm elections, has any sort of legal bearing on whether or not he can or can't talk to Mueller after September 1st.
Right, and this would be a question for Chelsea
Yeah.
or Brooke, who is an aspiring legal scholar. Well, she's actually currently a legal scholar. The idea that he doesn't necessarily have to talk to Mueller if he doesn't want to, but there's one thing I'm sure of. There might be a lot of people that don't want Donald Trump to talk to Mueller. I know Donald Trump wants to talk to Mueller. You can just tell how much he wants to do it. And the fact that, he hasn't just called into Fox and Friends, like, let me tell you what I'm going to tell Mueller, and just gone through the whole thing.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be fair. Fox and Friends, there's only a couple hours. So he would start, then he would call in the Sean Hannity show. And then, he'd probably just keep going between the two shows and get everything out there. But I don't know. I don't see how it's going to happen, but do you think it'll happen ever, Tamra? This September 1st, it just seems like it's like saying, well, if it doesn't happen by tomorrow, it's just, you might as well have said
Mueller
tomorrow.
interview Trump?
Yeah, will Trump agree to it, and will Ivanka let him do it, basically?
I think that when it gets to the point in the investigation that he needs to be interviewed, I think everybody will advise him that it's in his best interest to do it, because if he doesn't, it's too incriminating. So I would think that the same people that advised him that he has to walk back the remarks that he made about Putin after their meeting in Helsinki, the people like that who he listens to will probably advise him that he has to comply with the Mueller investigation, despite whatever he likes to, say inflammatory things against them on Twitter. But he has to comply, or else it's just too damning.
Right. And the deadline about September 1st is basically telling Mueller, well, you have to wrap up the whole thing by September 1st. It's like he won't talk to you by then because he won't talk to you after then because he wants you to wrap it up by then. So he's like basically saying you have 2 weeks. And if they subpoena President Trump, it then has to go to a higher court who has to decide whether or not, he is compelled to speak with the special counsel.
I would be curious if they say September 1st, because this is probably being very conspiratorial, but if there's some sort of fund or account that they can close the books on August 30th, if that's why he's choosing September 1st to be like, you know what I mean? Like there's some reason that, I guess that doesn't, I don't know.
I think that there can certainly be some funding involved. There's some putting pressure on, I don't know where the money's going to come from. It could definitely be something like that. I think that, I don't know. I'm just surprised that Trump hasn't spoken already. And like I said before, not necessarily to Mueller, but what he wants to say to Mueller. I'm surprised he doesn't have a press conference where he just stands there and just rattles it all off and takes no questions.
I would ask supporters of I would ask Trump supporters and people in his administration, if you are so confident that he is innocent of any wrongdoing, then what do you have to lose by him talking to him? Why wouldn't he?
And our friend R. Scott Brown in the chat talking about the important issues here. He did indeed confirm that Strzok had a consensual extramarital relationship with the colleague that he exchanged emails with.
Oh, so we were both right.
Yeah.
It was a colleague and a...
Yeah, I always knew it was a colleague,
okay.
but I knew it was his side piece. So everybody's right.
The word side piece sounds extra seedy.
That's why I used it, because the whole thing is pretty seedy to use your FBI FBI phone to a colleague's FBI phone, and this is your dirty
Side
talk.
piece.
We are gonna get that Trump.
But
What are we gonna do?
she's an FBI agent.
Yes, I believe she went to the boardwalk at Seaside Heights and got one of those cards that says female body inspector. It's not true. Anyway, his text.
Wait, isn't she though an FBI agent?
She is an actual FBI agent. Yeah. And
I just don't want to demean her by saying she's just this,
she's a card carrying side piece of an agent, I believe. Luke Riley, welcome to the chat. I don't believe I've seen Luke before. The bottom line is this: where there is smoke, there is fire. Enough things have happened so that there is no way to deny something happened. Mueller needs time to get it straight. Now, I agree with that, but look, I defer to Rudy Giuliani in most things. If Rudy Giuliani feels like this needs to be done by September 1st, this is why I wear a bracelet that says WWRD. What would What would Judy do? What would Dame Judi Dench do?
When do we just start calling him Judy? That's his Brangelina name. What would Rudy Giuliani do?
Yeah, what would Rudy Giuliani do?
RG.
Yeah. What?
WWRGD.
But anyway, I do agree that he does need the time to...
Not to be confused with my WWRBGD, Ruth Bader Ginsburg do.
That's right. But we could sell all of these. Is there like a shop.afterbuzz or something? I'm surprised that we don't have Trump shirts or I don't know. We should be selling.
There is an online store.
What's that?
There is an online store.
There is?
Get AfterBuzz merchandise.
Could we create merch?
Was that just for us, or did the audience hear you say that, Marissa?
It's the audience.
Okay, I wanted to make sure because I would have repeated what you said if that was just in my ear. So there is an AfterBuzz online store. All right. So I'm going to suggest a line of the WWJD style bracelets. And, one of the things that I would wear, Marissa, is what would Marissa do? Because you know what the answer to that is? Be on time. That's what Marissa would do.
This is an inside joke. Sorry, guys.
That's right, though.
I think people who watch the show realize that the show doesn't usually start on time. So anyway, one of the things that I wanted to talk about, we just really ran out of time last week. And there's other things that we'll get back to after this. But usually when I save things, I'm like, we'll get to that at the end of the show. We don't ever get to it. So it was this idea that and of course now you're the only woman on the panel, but I like to feel that I can try to be sensitive when it comes to these things. I brought it up because it struck me as sort of a funny idea, but I'm not looking at it in the right perspective. And this is the idea that the ACLU appeared to endorse a ban on catcalling despite huge First Amendment concerns. Now, what I didn't mention about the story was that this is actually a law in France. And so there was a tweet about it in the ACLU's official account, sort of commented, like, anybody listening? As in like, hey, this sounds like a good idea. So I think you really didn't get much time to talk about this. I tried, and then I was like, oh, this is too big of an issue. I couldn't mansplain it to myself enough. So I wanted to, can you woman-splain it to me?
The ACLU's endorsement of this was basically a tweet that was soon after taken down. So I don't know. I wouldn't say that they endorse
So it's less about that part of it than the idea, though.
Yeah.
So it's the conversation I thought was still worth having, even though the ACLU was like, whoops, I did not mean to like that one.
So I would be curious. In reading about whether or not catcalling should be a crime, I think that it's pretty impossible to regulate. How would you enforce that in France? If they have made it a crime to street harass people, I don't see how that could be enforced because it happens so spontaneously, so quickly, and oftentimes there's nobody else around. So how could you possibly? All women should be wearing body cams now. Like, how is this possibly enforced? Is my biggest question.
I mean, I think a lot of women in the workplace might want to have the body cams on, or maybe some of the Omarosa recording, because apparently, just all the things that you get out of the Me Too movement is like, oh, I can't believe. I mean, you should be able to believe, but you're still surprised. Like, wow, that was said to you by a supervisor at work. So you would have this Omarosa style evidence.
I don't know how they're doing it in France. I mean, yeah, well, you're joking, but like in France,
but
like,
I don't know how they do it in France.
How do they? Yeah, that's my question. It's like whoever came up with this idea, there's no actual logic to how it should be implemented, because it just, whether or not it's a First Amendment violation, it just doesn't make sense as to how this would be enacted and enforced.
Yeah, and one of the places I was reading about this, it's Reason.com, which is a libertarian magazine. I don't think they do the print magazine anymore. I think it's just a website now, using old words like magazine. But the point...
you lost me. I don't...
Yeah, it's an app. This is what they said in there. As obnoxious as catcalling is, the government simply can't prevent men from talking to women in public. I think somebody like Alex Jones might say, oh, no, that's exactly what they want to do. But,
yeah, well, see, and the perfect example of libertarianism is that in trying to be unbiased, but they are saying every example that they give of this is, you can't prevent men from talking to women in public, as if that's what it is.
Right.
Like that's diminishing what the actual issue is, which is harassment. And you can't take it out of the context of the sexism out of it. Just, can you bully somebody on the street? Can you yell somebody's fat, hey, fatty? Can you do that on the street? Should that be a crime? Should you be able to harass another human being? See, that's the thing too, is that the sexism of street harassment is you are objectifying a woman. You are not respecting her as a human being. So let's talk about it in terms of a person talking to another person. It's an issue of harassment, whether it's a sexual nature or just a harassment nature in general. You can't, I don't see how that could be regulated. So.
Right. And it's like, well, I'm harassing you as a person. I'm not harassing you because you're a woman. I'm harassing you because, I'm just a dick and I harass everyone. I'm not saying me literally, but I the point is, because you have to sort of any kind of harassment, which it would be great if we could, I think France would love to have, they seem to be trying to have something like that. It's like, well, let's be polite. Let's not be inappropriate, because if the French are known for anything, it's being polite.
But so going back to the people that the anti-street harassment organizations were saying, let's curb this from the root of the problem, which is we should be teaching men who feel that this is an okay thing to do, the respectability issue of it, that you cannot, this is something that I experience literally daily. This is
right.
As a person
this is what
who
you were
takes public
talking about.
I take public transportation. I have literally walked out of the studio from here, and I walk to the train station, and cars drive up and pull up slowly, and they'll say, "Need a ride? Need a ride? Need a ride?" And then you ignore them, or you can talk back. Either way, they will follow you until their heart's content, until finally they decide to drive off. And that is just being a woman. That is your day. Somebody rolls down a window and goes... That happens daily. Most of the time, actually, it's very LA, obviously, like this happens a lot more. Somebody shouting or doing things out of cars, equally or more than somebody actually passing you on the street saying things like that. But this is something that one of the articles even said, like, men don't realize how prevalent this is. Your guess as to how many women or how often they experience this is probably much lower than it actually is. So that being the case, like, you can tell, like, I'm very passionate about how wrong this is that this happens. But even, like I said, like,
there's nothing you can
put
do
any
to
sort of
really,
law in place, the only way to curb it is to teach men that women are human beings and not objects. And I've been trying to do that in every aspect of my life.
Well, I think that that sort of stance would probably start with the White House. And I think if you have someone at the top who runs the country, who shows that, nothing but respect for women, I think it's nice to be able to point to, my son Felix is like, well, look how President Trump treats women. That's a lesson to learn. But see, that's not a lesson to learn. So that's what we need.
And just briefly, Chelsea said that we
our
should.
co-host Chelsea Galicia.
Yeah.
Usually
and
Chelsea
so,
people think someone else.
Oh, yeah,
This
yeah.
is not Chelsea
so
Clinton.
Chelsea Galicia said that she thinks that. And this is, if she, as a joke, I it's funny, and I agree that just say that they. Oh, that's an indication that you have a tiny wiener if you're shouting at women on the street. But the reason that I would let that go any further than a joke is because that's sending the message that, so if they were well endowed, then it's okay. That it's keeping it this issue of sexism and objectivity, and that's it's not taking it out of the only way to move beyond street harassment is for it to not become an issue of sexual dominance,
Well, speaking of women who were treated well by President Trump, Stormy Daniels is joining Celebrity Big Brother UK. This is a story that Chelsea would hate that we were talking about, but that she'll be alongside Kirstie Alley. And it's interesting because I guess the word celebrity means something different in the UK than it does here. But obviously she's very well known at this point. I have to.
You think it means that what?
The word celebrity used to mean you were famous, like Dancing with the Stars.
Yeah, but look at our celebrities.
Well, that's what I was going to use the comparison. Dancing with the Stars, and you see who's on Dancing with the Stars. You're like,
we have somebody who answered a phone call during a telethon on Dancing with the Stars now. Like,
that's true. Yeah, it's like we don't really, the word stars doesn't mean what it used to. The word celebrity doesn't mean what it used to. But
the days of the studio system when celebrities were celebrities.
That's right. But not, when big stars like Michael Ironside, I just wanted to use somebody who wasn't that well known. Do you think that it's someone, there's a reason that I brought this up, just because it's a funny story, but also because, do you think that it's going to be somebody's job in the White House or some part of the Trump organization that they'll have some sort of like weird satellite hookup where they watch
somebody's job to watch
they
the
just
show.
watch to just see everything that she says and just be ready for how to spin it the next day? Because, by the way, I think somebody's going to be watching. They're not going to be like a source, or maybe they'll just fly someone
Trump
to the UK.
Will watch it. It involves anything that his name could possibly come up. He's all ears.
Yeah, but see, he just wants to hear, And here's the thing: like anything that she says, he'll probably not comment on. But then, my feeling is that if she. Well, what Chelsea was saying before, if she, alludes to a small manhood of any kind, then she'll know that she's going to get a response, probably before she even finishes her sentence, because I believe he had to take time out of, this was not a presidential debate with Hillary, but it was one of those Republican debates when there were like 16 people running. He had to explain that his hands were perfectly sized, which, by the way, they are not. They are tiny micro hands. I don't know that that's indication of anything else, but he does have small hands. I don't ever want to know about anything else that's small, but he has small hands. But anyway, let us know what you think in the chat. Somebody's going to be watching this.
I just wish that the thing is, obviously Stormy Daniels has agreed to do this because she needs money. She, it's probably a hefty paycheck for her. She needs some sort of stability, especially after your name's dragged through the mud, and she, what are you gonna continue? Anyway, she needs this for the financial opportunity of it, but what it does is it makes a further joke of Stormy Daniels. It turns her into a caricature by being on a reality show of a person who we should be taking very seriously for something that was a very serious.
She was paid off to not talk about something. It was paid off sort of at the height of the campaign. So yeah, there's obviously it's very easy to demean someone because like, oh well, she's just a porn star or porn actress, however you want to call it. But obviously, it's sort of stemming from that is the payment. That's why it's so interesting. I feel like I know Chelsea won't watch.
That's why we need to take her seriously,
yeah.
and by joining a reality show, especially who else is going to be on it besides Kirstie Alley? There's, not Vern Troyer, rest in peace, but whoever else may be on it. It's just, it would have been nice to be able to keep her a little bit more.
Like if she had joined like The View or something instead, somewhere she'd be more sort of out front and outspoken.
Yeah.
I mean, and let's be honest, if The View had offered her a position at that table, she would have taken it. I think that this is just where the money was.
And I might have actually started watching The View. They did a disservice to themselves by not just by not missing out on my viewership, but
right.
I'm saying on everybody's view.
everybody's.
If I would have watched The View because the Stormy Daniels was on the panel, then everybody.
I definitely would have tuned in that first day, and I would have kept an eye on it. Earlier today, President Trump talked for 28 minutes about a bill that was named for John McCain, who, as we all know, is ailing, and I don't know exactly what the prognosis is, but he's not doing well. At no point during the 28 minutes did President Trump mention John McCain, whom the bill was named for. And, I mean, it's hardly the first time that politics has been petty, and certainly not the first time that President Trump has been petty. But I'm trying to think of other ways to ask the question, does this surprise you? Because the answer is it can never be yes anymore. But do you think somebody in the room should have just yelled out, big ups to John McCain, something,
Shout out to Jay McSee. Get your WWJMD bracelets right here. Get them while they're hot. Yeah, I mean, it was clearly a very calculated move. I can't wait to hear Sarah Huckabee Sanders explain, look, he's got a lot on his mind. She's going to defend that it was a mistake. He didn't mean to, miss his name. That's what she's going to say.
It was right here on his notes. He just, President Trump doesn't need to refer to his notes because he's so well-spoken and articulate. The bill was called the John S. McCain National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2019. It really does roll off the tongue. But, it being named for John McCain, it certainly could be there. And I don't know, you don't have to be sincere. You can just say like, somebody who I've had some issues with, but obviously John McCain, whatever. But speaking of The View, I think that we know what Meghan McCain's going to talk about on The View tomorrow. So if you do want to watch, that would be your place.
I gotta say, I didn't even know Meghan McCain was on the panel of The View.
I see The View at the gym. So there are 4 TVs, so I can tell you what's on The View. I can tell you what's happening on reruns of Supernatural, a show I've only ever seen. And then there's some morning show on Telemundo, which is it's a little racy, I'll tell you that much. But anyway, there was a fun story that I saw. A 14-year-old boy who's using a legal quirk to run for governor of Vermont. I'm so cynical, as I feel like even a 14-year-old boy who's going to run for governor of Vermont, I'm like, yeah, but there's going to be.
But is he a socialist?
Well, that's going to be the it's like, where does he stand on the issues? What about his dark past? Is there going to be a private investigator that looks into what?
To be fair, a 14-year-old does have a dark past. How many YouTube videos has he commented?
I hope you get cancer or something like that.
Kill yourself. I'm
true.
sure he does have a dark past. He's going to be the first example of the world that we're entering when the teenagers that were only raised in the digital age will start applying for jobs, and they will have a way to check, how many times did you cyberbully somebody?
Yeah, and I know that there's this trend to like film yourself playing video games and post it on YouTube, and the clips that I've heard, these kids aren't being very nice to each other. So there might be something. But anyway, so he's able to run for, I almost said president, but, in 20 some odd years. But all you have to do to run for governor of Vermont is have lived in Vermont for 4 years. So
And have more than 6 pints of Ben and Jerry's in your freezer at any given time.
Well, I mean, that's, yes. But I don't think you're allowed to live in Vermont. Like, I believe that they do inspections to make sure that you, because if you have 5 pints, you're going to get a ticket, but that's a warning. So, yeah, you always have to.
But if you're going to run for office.
Yeah. And then one of them has to be Chunky Monkey. But so my question is, when are we going to get a 5-year-old that's going to run for governor? Because, if that's what the rules are, and I don't know, when you hear something like this, are you ever inclined to just like, oh, if I lived there, I would vote for them? And I'll use an example. When I moved to California, I was still registered to vote in New York, so I could not vote in the recall election that led to Arnold Schwarzenegger. I knew a lot of people who voted for Arnold Schwarzenegger because they thought it was funny. I also know people who voted for Gary Coleman. I actually forget who some of the other ones were, but there's
back in the day when it was safe to vote for a candidate because you thought it would be funny.
Right, but you see, there are 2 instances now where people may have voted for a host of Celebrity Apprentice because they thought it was funny, and both times they won. So, do you feel like if something like this was happening, and regardless of the young man's stance on the issues, which I'm sure they're very controversial, do you feel like, I don't know, should we take our votes more serious than like, oh, let's vote for the 14-year-old. That's cute that he's running?
I mean, I guess if I was super in favor of the lieutenant governor, because that's who would, I guess, ultimately be making the policies and having and actually wielding the power. If there was a 14-year-old in office, I would think that it would fall on the shoulders of the lieutenant governor and the staff, surrounding him. So if I had a lot of faith in those people, sure. And I didn't like. Is he running? What's his Democratic, or what's his party? Is he?
I believe I see. It's funny because I clicked on to the next thing. I believe he was a Democrat, but that's just that's possibly fake news.
I'm a Democrat, so if I were voting in Vermont,
he's one of 4 Democrats seeking the party nomination. Okay, so honestly, if there is a debate for these 4 Democratic candidates, I can't say I'm going to watch the whole thing, but I will look for it on YouTube, and I definitely want to see some. I want to see a little bit.
So let's say 2 of those candidates have some sort of sexual harassment scandal in their past that comes out. One of them is in favor of, what's some issue that most Democrats would be against. I don't know.
He's in favor of the wall?
Well, but Vermont wouldn't be.
They would want the wall to keep Canada out.
Yeah. Okay. So then let's say that he was my only viable Democratic candidate. Then, you know what? Sure. Let's do it.
So there's a.
Let's stand on a platform of Pokemon Go and Tide Pod challenges.
Well, I mean, if he's going to go on the important issues, it's funny. All of the caveats that you gave, it just reminded me of, asking a girl to go to the prom. It was like, well, if nobody asked me to go and I don't have anything to do and it's not raining that day. It's just jokes. I want my girlfriend. But we have fun here on the Trump Report. But I wanted to see what's going on in the chat. R. Scott Brown, once again, I think this is your 3rd mention, focusing on the important issues. Who needs a freezer in Vermont? You can leave ice cream outside until mid-May. After that, you just drink it out of the container to maintain your winter weight. By late August, it'll freeze again. Now, I mentioned that because it was funny, and we appreciate R. Scott Brown here.
Very true. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. And from last week, our friend Storage Yard Resident wanted to nominate Amy Goodman of the Democracy Now! Show as the left-wing equivalent of Alex Jones. Now, I don't know anything about Amy Goodman, and that's kind of the point, how I don't think there is a left-leaning Alex Jones, because I don't know. I'm trying to think of when I first heard of Alex Jones. It's like 5-6 years. I've certainly known who he is for a while. I don't know who Amy Goodman is. Do you know who she is? It's yeah.
No, I've never heard the name. I'd be curious because I would say yes. The equivalent would be in notoriety, but also does she have a ton of conspiracy? Is she a conspiracy theorist? I'm interested now. As soon as I go home, I'm gonna look her up and see if she's got what crazy things she may have said to
Yeah,
her
well,
on par
and
with
so
Alex Jones.
that's the thing is we'll give ourselves some homework. Storage Yard resident, thank you for letting us know who she is. Now you made the comment a week ago. Actually, you only made it 2 days ago, so that's going to be my excuse.
And the whole reason I asked in the first place if there was an equivalent to Alex Jones was because it is my personal opinion that though the left and the right are both culpable in, misreporting things, the left tends to wrongly exaggerate things, sort of wrongly intensify things that maybe weren't that big a deal, whereas a lot of people who have a huge following on the right just straight up create
and you don't even
false narratives of crisis actors.
Right. I mean, you don't even have to generalize. You can just point at, like, these are all the things that are true about Alex Jones. The crisis actors, the school shooting that didn't happen. And that inspired somebody to drive to a family's house and basically tell them that, what are you doing? Your kid's not dead. So, there's a lot. There's a lot to take in there. But anyway, thank you for all of your comments. And thanks to everybody who watched us live. We will be back next Monday. Hey, if it's just the two of us again, that'll be fine. But we'll see who's with us. I think Scott might be back. But you know what, Scott? If you're off having fun, don't rush back just for us. I can look up some poll numbers on my own. But thank you, Tamra Brown. Tamra, where do people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at HeyTamra_. You can find me on YouTube at HeyTamra.
And you can find me at ChristianDMZ on Twitter and Instagram. And one of the new shows I'm doing here, at least new for me, is the Better Call Saul after show, Mondays at 10 Pacific, and also Marvel TV Weekly, Sundays at 10 Pacific. Take note, I do things after my kids go to bed. Anyway, thanks so much to Tamra and to everybody who joined us in the chat. We'll see you all next week. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.